Hey everyone, it's Stephanie again, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 12, Episode 14. All right, before we get started, don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be the first to find out when I post these videos. All right, let's get into it. This week's episode was about the couples digging into their past. So basically, intertwining family, as well as some of their favorite pastimes that they did, things that they did as a kid. They showed each other pictures, just experiences of things that they were into. They touched on family. And then also they revisited certain questions that they had, that we saw like a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Pepper. So I will sum up the past stuff. The past stuff was great. You know, they, like Eric and Virginia, she played basketball with him, and you know, that was cute. And Vince went to the bodega, and that gave a, beautiful representation of his past. And he was also able to talk about things organically that let Brianna know some things about him. So I liked all of that. I thought that was sweet. But I want to focus for this review on just the dynamics of the couples, because that's just really what's most important. And also, I love that Dr. Pepper comes in with the boom. Like, Dr. Pepper has been, to me, MIA most of the season, but she has been here like the last couple of episodes, and she does not play around. She doesn't mess around. She goes straight for the jugular. She pushes them to do better, which is like what a great therapist would do. And you could tell she's been married a long time, so she kind of forces them to have these conversations, or circles back, or calls them out, and it's like, that's not what I heard. Like, so I like that she was there. And I feel like we haven't seen this component on Married at First Sight. If we have seen it, it's been a very long time. Because they sat there, and I like that. I believe the last time it was Pastor Cal and Dr. Viviana who asked them separately what their issues were, and then prompted them to say, go back to your spouse and ask this particular question. Or you're coming here, Clara and Ryan, saying that everything is perfect, but we know that you guys have a disconnect with religion and a disconnect with the intimacy in your relationship, so let's get to it. Virginia, the drinking, like, let's get to it. So I like that for the first time we see like a continuation of that. Dr. Pepper comes in and is like, so the things that we discussed, which is exactly what it should be. This is like, if they had this throughout the season, I guess there would be less drama, so maybe they wouldn't want to have it. But if they had it throughout the season, this would give the couples a stronger foundation, or they know where they were not going to work out. Because it's like, hey, let's talk about the things we've talked about. What movement has been made on that? Were you able to have the conversation, and where are we now? So let's kick it off with Jake and Haley. I'm tired about talking of them. I really am. I'm tired of talking about them because I don't think they're matched well. I haven't thought that the entire season. Every week we see why. Haley's checked out. Haley's been checked out. Jake is trying, but I think Jake so desperately wants this to work out because he really wants to be married. He really wants to be in that next phase of his life. He's 38 years old. His biological clock is ticking. And he could see that, he could see that, like, in some ways it could work. It could work with Haley if they got along. It's like fantasy. In his mind, it could work if they didn't keep bumping each other's heads. But the reality is, they're not meant to be. I don't really even think that Jake likes Haley. I think he likes the idea of Haley, but I don't think they have enough in common for it to actually work out. I don't really think that Jake likes Haley, to be honest, because they don't get along. They're different phases of their life. They have different interests. They have different communication styles, or lack thereof. They both struggle on communication in different ways. Haley's just not into him, and I think it would be more respectful to just be honest about that rather than pretend, because right now that's what they're doing. They're pretending, they're buying time. The issue of the bracelet came up again, and that was like frustrating to watch, because I think that, Jake's issue was first of all, I think it was tacky for him to bring up how much it was. If you buy a gift, then you buy that gift. You know, you're not chastising your child and saying, do you know how much that was? You know, do you know how much those sneakers were? Like, if you buy a gift, just buy the gift. But he, you know, kept bringing up the price when the issue was that I bought something valuable because I thought you were valuable even before I knew you, and you just don't have the same sentiment, and it's hurtful. Where the reason Haley never, like, she said, okay, I had my mom take it because I didn't want people, you know, somebody to lose it. There's chaos in the room. I get that. But the reality is Haley doesn't care. Haley doesn't care. It's why the bracelet never comes up for her. It's why she cannot really conceptualize what he's saying. Because in his mind, he is, well, not in his mind, he's saying, at least have the bracelet here. Like, you don't even think about it enough to have it in your possession, to have it sent back. Everybody's looking at it like, why can't Haley get this? It's because Haley doesn't care, okay? And I wish that Haley, because, you know, me and my husband were talking about this, and he was like, she should at least have it sent back. And I said, but I think based on what I've seen of Jacob, even if it was sent back, the new issue would be you haven't even pulled it out. You haven't even worn it. You haven't even thought about wearing it. You haven't, you know, because they're not connected. So everything can be a thing, because guess what? If Jacob and Haley were having sex and they were getting along really well, it may have come up, but they would be so fulfilled by a good relationship that wouldn't be like the thing. That wouldn't be the straw that broke the camel's back. Where Haley is wrong is that she just won't even kind of hear that he's hurt. She won't hear that he's hurt. She won't even acknowledge, okay, you're right, I could have had it sent back, or I'm sorry because I didn't think that much, and I'm sorry that it hurt your feelings. Like, there's no explanation and there's no acknowledgement of his feelings. And that's where she is wrong to me this season. That's where she is wrong, because it just shows like a lack of empathy. She doesn't have to care for him, because she doesn't, you know. My husband and I were going back and forth because he was like, well, she should have had the bracelet sent back. And I said, I really don't think she should have. I think she should say, listen, I am sorry that I made you feel that way. We've been disconnected since the honeymoon. I've been disconnected. Therefore, like, I didn't want to bring that bracelet and send the wrong message, because that's what it is. She's not thinking about the bracelet because she's not connected to you. Therefore, any sentimentality is lost here. And I definitely don't want to wear this bracelet and give you the idea that I want to be with you, because I don't, you know? So I feel like just being empathetic as a person and acknowledging his hurt is the best thing they could do, because now she's getting a bracelet from her mom, and it's like this petty thing. He puts the hat that she gave him on her dresser, and it's not something like, hey, let me give you this back because we feel a way about it. It's not healthy. It's petty. It's like, okay, here you go, and now she's getting the bracelet, and now it's this thing that could have been remedied just as like human to human. And that's going to be another fight. They're exhausting to watch because there is nothing here. There's not like passion with dysfunction. Like, if you guys remember a few seasons ago, Jamie and Beth, who we thought they would never stay together, and they are. Jamie and Beth, they argued. They had a toxic situation, but you could tell that they really cared about each other. It's just that they both argued and communicated in a very toxic way. But there was passion there. There was something to look for where you're like, okay, I know they care about each other. They may not make it because they argue too much, but they like each other. They're attracted to each other. They have fun together at some points, you know, throughout the fights. There's none of that here. It's exhausting to watch. It's like, let's take this thing out to pasture at this point, because all of these things are building on like something that doesn't have a foundation to last or to stand on. So that's Jacob and Haley. I just don't think that they are matched well. So everything is going to be a thing. And I don't think they're good for each other. I think they're way too different. Even if they didn't argue, they're just way too different. And their expectations in a significant other, I don't think, measure up in each other. So they won't stay together for decision day. We're like 2 weeks out. They won't stay together for decision day, and they shouldn't. So that is Jacob and Haley. Next, we have Eric and Virginia. So Eric and Virginia, God, I've gone back and forth with them this whole season. What frustrated me watching this week's episode was the dialogue. First of all, there's a disconnect in reality, okay? Because Eric will say that things are going really good. Like, we had a few bumps in the road, and he did say, okay, we were really high, then we went low, then we are high again. But I don't think you guys are high. I think, and Dr. Pepper is calling it out. Like, they're sweeping things under the rug to not cause friction or dissension or anything. But that's problematic long term because you're not really dealing with the issue. My biggest takeaway for them this week was that argument that, it didn't turn into an argument, but a disagreement between them towards the end when they were talking about the type of marriage that they had. And I think that, the topic was being able to design your marriage in a particular fashion that works for you. And it doesn't have to look a particular way, because Eric is like, this is what marriage is. This is what it looks like. Virginia is like, we can make it what we want to make it. And for Eric, he's kind of like, got that, but there are standards that I have that I don't like, that should be. And listen, we can say a lot about Eric at this point, but I agree with him. And I think you just need to be matched with someone who agrees with you. Because I got frustrated on his end regarding Virginia when she couldn't understand why we're back to blacking out on the couch. It's like, you're not ready to be married. You're far too immature to be a functioning adult who cannot conceptualize why blacking out drunk or falling asleep because you're too drunk at your guy friend's house when your husband has a problem with it. Even, I forgot who she went out with. I want to say it was Eric's sister-in-law. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I missed who it was and I was not going to rewind. But she even, said, hey, that might concern me if my husband wanted to just fall asleep at his friend, female friend's house, and just that he's just gone and he's not coming home. Most people would have a problem with it. And if you don't have a problem with it, then be with somebody who won't have a problem with it. But most people would feel a way about that. And really, even if it's at your guy friend's house, it's like just blacking out drunk at a friend's house is very frat life, which is great for that time. If that's what you're doing, have fun, because at some point you won't be 21 anymore, and there will be different expectations for your life. So it really annoyed me watching her, because to me, she's not using the framework of like, let's design our marriage in a healthy way. She's using it as a way to not have as much structure, or as a way to do whatever she wants. Well, what if I don't agree? I felt like it was a dad going back and forth with his daughter about like a curfew. And he's like, you gotta come home at 12. Well, why can't I come? What's the big deal? Why can't I come home at like 1? Like, my friends are coming. It's like, girl, she just really irritated me. She has some maturity. It did not reflect well in that conversation. The fact that he had to go back and forth about saying, like, I get that. And we know that Eric isn't as flexible as he pretends to be. But I do think that if there were certain standards that they both could agree on, basic standards, hey, fidelity, let's not cheat on each other. And she just said, it's just that, and then everything else should be okay. Coming home at night, her reasons, you just want me to come home to an empty house? You're a functioning adult who goes to work. You can't possibly fall asleep on someone's couch every night. Like, you did come home before you got married. And my issue with her is, why do this experiment? Like, if you're this damaged, why do this experiment? Because it's one thing to do these things when you are single. When you're single, who cares? That's the freedom of being single. But to intentionally get into this situation where you cannot see that there are certain things that you're gonna have to leave behind when you join your life with someone else is absurd to me, and it gives me zero patience for her. I don't have patience for her in this episode. A part of me wonders why she fights so hard. Like, where is that coming from? Like, is there some trauma? What is there, a fear there? Is there anxiety there? Where is that coming from that you so desperately cannot to be alone, there might be something there to explore with a therapist. Because yeah, if your husband's out of town, he's a pilot, or if he travels for work, you're home. What? You go home. Okay, you may hang out with friends. Oh, we had fun. You come home, you live there. Why is that a problem? Why would that be? I thought that was a ridiculous conversation. And for those reasons, I don't see them lasting long. If they do, great, because they've worked it out. Just like Jamie and Beth several seasons ago, that was a train wreck most of the season. Even though they had fun together, they liked each other, but their arguments were so volatile that you're like, I cannot see how it worked out. Well, they're still together. I think 3 or 4 years later, maybe when the cameras went off, things changed, and it's great. They're still together. They appear to be happy. But what I'm seeing now, and I could only go based on now, is there's some fundamental things that are just not going to create longevity unless there's a major shift. So that's Eric and Virginia. I mean, at the beginning of the season, I was like kind of piecing together how it could work. But like a lot of those pieces don't exist right now. It's like, okay, well, if this was that, maybe in these few years, et cetera, et cetera. It's like doing a math equation that it's not gonna, we can't solve for X right now. I have no idea because there's something's missing. So you let me know what you thought. That's Eric and Virginia for this week. Next we have Brianna and Vincent. So Brianna and Vincent, their issue that is coming up now is the idea of having children. And I think that they just need to get on the same page about we want kids. And I wouldn't say the timeline of the same page, but they just need to give it time. So Brianna says, I do want to have a child of my own. I do want to experience birthing a child, but it's something that I fear greatly. And because Vincent is so thirsty for a family because he didn't have one, he doesn't get what he can't really hear her because all he's hearing is no. And that's not what she's saying. She's saying that she's very fearful, and they're not on the same page with the timeline. And realistically, it needs to be a little bit longer. You guys met 6 weeks ago. Like, this is not just a regular couple that have been together for a long time so they can jump in and have a family. And he needs to understand that. On top of that, her fears need to be expressed more directly. I think she's doing a pretty good job, but like, if I were there, if I was the mediator, I would push for that conversation to deepen. It just so happens to be this week, Black Maternal Health Week, Health Awareness Week. Studies and so many percentages show that Black women tend to suffer fatalities and having children significantly more than their counterparts for a myriad of reasons. And it starts with just because they're Black. So if you already have a co-occurring issue like high blood pressure, then that is something that can be fatal. It could be fatal to you. It could be fatal to the baby. Something that a lot of people don't know that I was actually discussing with other women yesterday was the high blood pressure that occurs after you have a baby. And so a lot of women were talking about, look out for this headache that may occur 5 to 6 days after you have a child. It might be indicative of high blood pressure. A lot of people miss that. Even if you had great blood pressure and stable blood pressure throughout, because a lot of people think it's just with the pregnancy. But there's a lot that happens to your body, both during and after having a baby. And so those things can be fatal. And one of the women that I was discussing it with said that she almost had an aneurysm, like she was that close. And several of them had to be hospitalized. I had no idea that this could even happen. After I had my son in the summer, I went up for my follow-up maybe a week later. I don't even know if it was a full week, but it might have been a week later. And my blood pressure was so high. I had never had that throughout my pregnancy. It was so high that she wanted to hospitalize me. And she said, hey, come back tomorrow, we'll check it. If if it's still high, we have to hospitalize you. So of course I was a mess, because my child is 5 days old, and I might have to leave him, and I'm nurse, all these things go. But she was like, I'm not gonna let you go home because you can have a stroke, you can die. So tomorrow, if it's high, I'm not gonna let you go home. Luckily, my sister is a nurse, and so she provided me with some interventions where I didn't have to be hospitalized. But I know some women who did have to be hospitalized. I say all that to say, these are they have to deepen the conversation. And I know that the show is not going to push them to have these conversations, but the male perspective here cannot understand the significance of what women go through in carrying a child and bringing a child into the world. And I would push for that conversation for Vincent and Brianna, because it's not just like, I have high blood pressure and I'm scared to have a baby. Let's talk about all the outcomes here. If he really heard that, then he would have a little more patience, not to say we need to have one within a year. That's too soon. They really need to talk about, first of all, they need to continue to learn each other, because there's so much to learn. And you guys just met 6 weeks ago. So realistically, even though you're married and we did this experiment and we're fast tracking it, let's take some time after the cameras are down and really get to know each other day to day without the interruption, organically, really sitting into this marriage. And then let's talk about all the stuff that can happen. She already has issues with high blood pressure, so she's high risk. Let's just put it out. She's high risk. And that is something that she has a reason for cause for pause. And her husband or any man will understand that, and really shouldn't have, beyond the voice of saying, I want a child and I want us to try and I just want you to know that, pushing too hard, because her life is at stake, not yours. So that kind of frustrates me. But he doesn't get it, because they haven't, it's been kind of like surface. They've touched on it, but not really. But the reality of that is it's more significant than he knows. So, I think they'll get there. Like I said, they are the like shining spot, the gold star of this season. And I think they have the best and most organic chemistry. And I see them working out. This is just a bump in the road, but it is something that they really need to discuss at length. And I think going to a doctor together and having that conversation would shed some light that would help them both understand, especially Vinny, because Vinny's hearing no. When it's not now, he's hearing no. And he needs to hear why, so that he can not be selfish about it, because that's just eventually what it's going to come across as when it's something so significant. So that's my spiel on Vinny and Brianna. So last we have Ryan and Clara. I don't believe what I'm seeing, but who knows what I'm seeing, because I don't believe we're seeing everything. So therefore, we can't really even believe what we see, because who knows? Ryan, I don't see how Clara could be in love with Ryan when she's not getting all of him. And I'm not even talking about physically. He doesn't offer any depth. He doesn't offer any insight, he has no emotional vulnerability. He's not super transparent. I mean, I'm literally laughing out loud at how he said he's like 9 out of 10, or I think he said like 99% husband or something. Like, what? How dare you think that? He just shows up, but he doesn't go above and beyond. Everything is very surface. I don't think I've seen one moment of depth from him this entire season. So here is where we're seeing Clara. Here's why she's been in love so many times, because she just falls in love. Because I don't see unless there's some stuff that we're not seeing, which could very well be the case for them, because they have this routine down. If you recall, when they were talking to Dr. Pepper, and she was asking Clara about, the intimacy aspect, she says the very same words that he says. She says, she says whatever she says, but then she says, I don't want it to be this thing that we just check off. He's been saying that the whole season. And she's been frustrated with that, but when they're in front of Dr. Pepper, she says exactly what he says. So they're in cahoots. So it's a part of me is like starting not to feel bad for her, because she's going along with what what he is saying, and they are in cahoots behind the scenes on how they're going to present. But Ryan seems like a nice guy. He does. He seems like a nice guy. But like for this experiment and as a husband, to me, he sucks because he's not really offering anything. And he likes to be in control, and he's going to remain in control, and he's not going to take into account how the other person feels. And if this was marry yourself at first sight, then that would be great. But there's somebody else to account for, and part of this experience is stretching yourself and getting a little uncomfortable, and being transparent and being vulnerable and trying to connect with someone that you chose to marry at first sight. And if you're not going to do that, then you shouldn't do this. So Ryan is very much like his cupboards, like, looks great on the outside. When it's closed, you open it up and it's a mess, and he's not even letting us see what's on the inside, but it's definitely not what's on the outside. And not that anyone is not a mess on the inside, but it's just the way that he presents is so pretentiously perfect and appropriate and for sure. I'll be sure. And you're giving me nothing, and I don't think it's, I don't know. I don't know, because I feel like they could possibly work out, because they might have something going on behind the scenes that we don't know. And that might be something to explore for them. I still don't get this wow couples chemistry. I've never gotten that from them, ever. So that hasn't changed. So the lack of interest in other things hasn't changed, or hasn't pushed to change anything like that. Only time will tell. We got 2 more weeks, y'all. It's been a ride, a long ride. But that's it. That's all I have for this week. Let me know what you guys thought. As always, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share, and I'll see you guys next week. Everyone have a wonderful weekend.